League Two. League Two.
What a lead.
League Two. Only one winner in the top 7 of League Two over the weekend. And I saw it. Saw it with my eyes at Wimbledon. They beat Notts County 2-0. This was a big game. 4th v 5th. Two teams with designs on automatic promotion, but just seeing it at arm's length before this one, I was really interested to see what I would see. Wimbledon had not won in 4 before this. They'd lost their last 2 games by 1-0. There was a record attendance at Plough Lane, the new Plough Lane. It was great to be part of that. Over 1,000 Notts fans made the trip. It was a great atmosphere. The sun was out. Brilliant. It was all set up for a fantastic game. And it wasn't a fantastic game. And that's because it was basically a complete mismatch. Wimbledon won 2-0 up after half an hour. Hugely comfortable. And I was quite surprised. But actually in the hour before kickoff, when I was studying the team sheets, and I was looking at a Notts County team without David McGoldrick, without Jody Jones, without a couple of other players, and obviously without Dan Crowley, who left in January. You're suddenly looking at a Notts team isn't really the Notts team that we watched from the start of last season until, the turn of this year. It looks very different on paper, and perhaps unsurprisingly, they're now a team that are still playing broadly the same possession-based style, but they don't have 3 of the 4 players that gave them the cutting edge or the attacking X factor that made them such a potent team over the last 18 months. Jata is still there, and he's the joint second top scorer in the league, as Michael Cheek went clear this weekend. But Jata's not a player that is going to run the game from up top. You need the players behind him to create the service for him so that he can do what he does. But he's not going to be the sort of players to generate it himself. And unfortunately, none of the midfielders or wide players were able to do that. And so Wimbledon just dominated. And it was a mismatch physically, very visibly. And that's not a surprise. I've seen it a couple of times this season at Plough Lane because Wimbledon are a team with a lot of height and a lot of strength. It's not just that. It's like a competitiveness that they have when they're really at it. It's a desire to impact the game with physicality, but also, getting on the ball as well, which Notts just didn't match whatsoever. Wimbledon just teamed all over them. It was a technical and tactical mismatch as well, where Wimbledon were able to build attacks in a number of different ways and invariably ending with a shot of some kind, whether that was going long into Omar Bugil, which is an incredible avenue of attack for them, and up against a 19-year-old centre-back in Zach Johnson. He just completely dominated, and the first half an hour was just Bugil running the game, basically. But they can build through the thirds as well. They're not as strong on this front, Wimbledon, but with Jake Reeves, they've got someone who can drop deep and get on the ball. With the wide players that they have in Tilly and Neufeld, they do have wide players that can, if necessary, just get on the ball and try and swing a cross in and create attack that way. And they always pack the box with people attacking crosses. So, even on the break, they were quite dangerous, which isn't, always the case for Wimbledon. Marcus Brown played just behind Bugil and Matty Stevens, and his positioning caused Notts all sorts of issues, kind of playing in this sort of inside left role and just running at the defence time and time again. It was 2-0 at half-time. I basically stopped making notes at that point because the game was over. Stu Maynard made some changes at half-time to stop the bleeding, brought on 2 centre-backs, which is never a great reflection at half-time when you're 2-0 down. And it had some impact. It stopped Wimbledon from creating chances at will, but he just didn't have much on the bench to change the game in an attacking sense. So, I guess one of my main takeaways, apart from, how much stronger Wimbledon looked than Notts, and therefore how much more confident I am that they could be the ones to reach the top 3 out of these 2, whereas beforehand I wouldn't necessarily have said that with much confidence. But also I went there expecting to see Jata against Matty Stevens, who were joint top scorers in the league before then. And I've left there thinking that the striker on the pitch in Omar Bugil, that has only scored 3 goals in 29 games this season, starting number 9 for Wimbledon, was the best player on the pitch, completely ran the game, and is just like, even without scoring any goals practically, such an impactful player at this level for what he does, both as a focal point for them to go long to, his incredible ability to bring others into play while holding off 2 defenders or flick-ons or whatever, and what he does out of possession, where he's just tireless, aggressive, making tackles. He consistently makes the most tackles in the league of League Two strikers, It just gives the whole team such a lift, I think. And I was so impressed with Omar Bogle. So that's my main takeaway on that. Felt bad for the Notts fans, really, because they were ironically cheering on 73 minutes when they had a shot, because they had such slim pickings throughout the game. A big win for Wimbledon, big result for them as well after winless in 4 before this. And it is quite clear that the first goal was very important in their games. In a weird way, it wasn't a massive surprise to see Wimbledon lose 1-0 to Bromley, 1-0 to Morecambe, going behind and then struggling to turn it around. But when they score first, they are just impeccable. And I saw it once again in front of my eyes. So they've got the top 3 to shoot at. Interesting weekend for the top 3. Walsall losing at home to Grimsby. Bradford's winning run snapped at Cheltenham. And Donny throwing away a 2-goal lead at home to Swindon. George, let's go for Walsall 1, Grimsby 3 first up. Massive from both angles.
Yeah, huge. For Walsall, this was an opportunity, really, at home, having got a fine point away at Carlisle in midweek where they played okay and had chances to win the game, albeit Carlisle went close late on. But to play at 12:30 before the team is beneath them, albeit the game you're at was also 12:30, but crucially before Bradford's trip to Gillingham, and to kind of make that 2-point gap 5 before the 3 o'clock kickoffs, and then to go ahead as early as they did with a really nice finish from Ellis Harrison. What an opportunity that is to kind of stop the rot, to go ahead, to go forward and win the game, and put to bed these justified nerves at the moment that they could be throwing away what was such a commanding lead, not just in terms of winning the league, but the promotion itself, because they have to pick up. So to be 1-0 up early and then lose the game 3-1 feels like it has to be kind of the nadir for this terrible run. Matt Sadler has to find a way to find Walsall's winning touch again. A team that was so clinical and was so good at winning games, currently finding it possible to do so. Luca scored the equaliser, Jaden Luca, from the edge of the box before a pretty obvious penalty was awarded to Grimsby just before half-time. Tiny Rose tucked home. It was that man Luca, or that boy really, the teenager on loan from Luton, who's been really impressive this season for Grimsby, only his second and third goals for them in the league, but someone who on that right-hand side has been a constant source of energy and creativity, making it 3-1, and it was justified. Town with a better team on the day, and everyone, myself included, keeps doubting their staying power, keeps doubting whether or not they've got enough to finish the season in the playoff spots, but they keep putting in these kind of performances and getting these results. They're currently just only outside the playoffs on goal difference, but they've played a game fewer than the team currently in 7th in Crewe, and Crewe themselves are obviously not playing well at the moment at all. Massive credit to David Artell for the job that he continues to do. This time last year, Grimsby were really staring down the barrel of a possible relegation scrap back into non-league, and Artell has very quickly changed the playing style. The recruitment's been on point, and they are a real force to be reckoned with. So a big result for them, but continuing big concern for Walsall.
Yeah, home to Notts, Grimsby in the black and white stripes derby in midweek. I would genuinely, again, maybe overreacting to what I saw from Notts on Saturday, but I would expect them to win. And if they do, depending on what Vale do, Grimsby could be 5th come the weekend, which is incredible. They've definitely shored up defensively. I looked, that's reflected in both the XG against, but also the goals against column, 0s and 1s in their last 8 games. And the fact that they've only failed to score twice in 18 means that that's giving them a really good platform. For Walsall, I've got a stat followed by a theory, right? Yep. You like a stat followed by a theory? Yeah, I thought so.
Always.
Yeah, I thought so. Per FBref, how many players have played more than 3,000 minutes this season? Understanding that 3,000 league minutes is 33 or 34 full matches, so well over 90% of total minutes so far. Walsall have 6 such players who've played over 90% of minutes so far. 9 teams in League 2 have no players who have played over 3,000 minutes. And the league average, if you take the other 23 teams, is 1 player per team that's played 90% of minutes or more. If you look at the amount of players that have played more than 600 minutes, so that's just a small portion of the season, the league average is 20 players, as you might expect. Walsall have had 14 players that have played more than 600 minutes. So it's a tiny group of players for Walsall, notably so, playing a huge amount of minutes. And I think that explains, George, to an extent, both their great middle part of the season where they were in great rhythm. The team was more established. The telepathy between players, it was just such a repeatable performance level, and probably partly explains the current decline, where I think there's an argument to say that a lot of the players who've played 3,000 minutes or more are a little tired and are finding it quite difficult with the schedule, with the pressure, with the declining performances and results. So there you go. That's my...
And you couple that with losing one of the best players in the whole division, who is also quite good at running around a lot. Yeah, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
For sure. The good news for Walsall, again, is that teams beneath them not really capitalising on it. They've all slowed down a little bit, to be honest. Even Bradford, in this case, who've been winning for fun recently, they lost at Gillingham. Big save from Morris to deny Lee early on, and then Masterson controlled a corner and smashed home for Gills. They had a horror show in midweek against Newport, but that's been put to bed now. 2 big wins in the last 2 weekends for Gillingham has done them the world of good. And I just want to mention Bode and Gale, 2 academy graduates, one playing up front, one playing at the back. They've been starting every game recently. They've been among Gills' better players. And it's nice to see academy graduates thriving at all times, but particularly in a tough situation, I think it's even more impressive, particularly when Gills have signed so many players in the last few windows. But it's these 2 who are making their mark. And hopefully, if the season ends without too much jeopardy, we can see Gabode and Gale growing and getting better and attacking next season as established first-team players. For Bradford, well, they aren't ever going to win every game, but I think missing chances at 0-0 and then conceding such a poor goal from a corner will be pretty frustrating for Graham Alexander. Then draws beneath them for Donny, who were 2-0 up and threw it away against Swindon. Rob Street with a run and finish. Luke Molyneux, with a good dribble, setting up Joe Sabara. It was easy street for Donny at 2-0. Then it was Holloway Road for Swindon. Butterworth with an absolute spanker of a goal to make it 2-1. And then Botan Amin, the academy graduate, who's getting more and more minutes under Holloway, he set up Wesley. And that was the 3 substitutes, Butterworth, Wesley and Amin. 2 of them scored, 1 of them got an assist, and in the words of Richard from the squad, Amin looked like Cristiano Ronaldo, which is pretty exciting for an academy graduate. A Sharp thought he'd scored the winner, turning home after a corner was flicked on. He was offside, the flag went up. Sharp then turned to the ref and went like, no, I didn't touch it. I actually didn't touch that one. So you should allow the goal. And the ref was like, well, why did you wheel away then, Billy? And well, it's in my blood, isn't it? Anyway, that was quite a funny moment for the neutral, not for Donny fans. Frustrating for them. Port Vale equalised in injury time against Fleetwood to draw 1-1. This game probably had my favourite incident of the whole EFL weekend, where Connor Hall had a close-range header, magnificently saved. Smith then had the rebound cleared off the line by Phoenix Patterson. The ball was cleared away, then played down the right-hand side. Suddenly Fleetwood were 2-on-1 at the other end. Devonport across to Graydon to finish. It was generally like a regular season version of the Deeney goal, in that there was a double save and then cleared down the right-hand side, ball across for the goal. 6 goals in 5 games for Graydon, but deep into injury time, Phoenix Patterson with a high boot in the box, Lauren Tulai with the penalty, 1-1, Vale's 3rd draw in a row. And Crewe, they also came from behind to draw at Salford.
Get a 6-match ban for that, shouldn't he?
For the high boot. Nice reference. Can't wait for the Liam Roberts, Millwall, Crystal Palace discussion to fizzle out. Salford 1, Crewe 1, Kelly Namai for Salford, a lovely assist from Ben Woodburn, and then a banger from Connor O'Riordan, the big centre-back, just lashing home from outside the box. Salford, quite a weird team, I think we can say that now. Just 1 win in 11 after putting themselves in such a good position. They won 9 of 13 at one point this season, but before and after that spell, they've just been bang average, and it's looking like another pretty average season for Salford City. But a big story in League Two over the weekend, and a big story in general at the moment, is Colchester United, George. Are they the team to make a big playoff push? They won 1-0 at Cheltenham. They're unbeaten in what feels like 4 months, but isn't quite that long. Harry Anderson scored the winning goal. Famously, one of the Cowley's adopted footballing sons has been working with them for almost 10 years now at their 3rd club together, scoring the winner. And they're a massive story at the moment, aren't they?
Massive. Yeah, as you say, the run of form is incredibly impressive. They were a team that, it wasn't that long ago, there were a few bad results from being in quite a difficult position. They had a period of time over kind of November and December where they had a really long unbeaten run, but only won 3 games, and I think drew 6. So it was kind of an unbeaten run of 12, but only 3 wins. They then lost back-to-back games. It was a run of 3 wins in however many. And as you say, since then, so basically since the turn of the year, the defeat at home to Accrington on the 4th of January sparked this incredible run, and they're unbeaten since then. They've won their last 3 games, all 1-0. Defensively, they're just so strong. They haven't conceded more than a solitary goal in any of those games since the 2-0 defeat at home to Accrington. And this was another case of that, where they went to a Cheltenham side who've been really impressive over the last couple of months, whose home form generally is very good, and they restricted them to very little by way of good chances. And it was a tight game where they managed to eat their way in front. So, this isn't a case where Colchester are a side who are blasting teams away and are putting massive distance between them and their opposition. And that always makes me think that it's probably a fair chance they're going to end up coming unstuck a little bit, where they're going to have these tight games against sides and they're going to be the ones who come off second best. But they put themselves in an incredibly strong position now to finish in the playoff spots. And because Crewe feel like a bit of a sitting duck at the moment in 7th, Colchester will see that 4-point gap with a game in hand and think it's easily surmountable. So really impressed with what they're doing, and great to see the Cowley brothers having, given a bit of time at a club and showing what they're capable of, because it does feel like they were maybe in some quarters written off a bit prematurely.
Should be maybe the best atmos that Colchester have seen for a long time at home to Port Vale in midweek. 6 points between the teams at the moment. One of the teams that Colchester will be targeting. Should be massive there. Blue and white in numbers. Shout out to that Twitter account, Colchester fan, who quote tweeted our Colchester stats tweet on the weekend and said, "I listen to this every week. We never get a single bit of credit, recognition or coverage. I hope none of these pundits claim that they predicted our rise." Now, instinctively, George, I was like, hold on. Cut me and I bleed Colchester, right?
Yeah.
I feel like my pro-Colchester stance has been a feature of the pod since before a ball was kicked this season.
Do you think he's gaslighting you?
I never really know what that means, but I don't know. I don't think so. I think he just heat of the moment. He was excited, and he's got a bee in his bonnet. And then I thought, you know what?
Maybe I should. And he ignored me.
I was like, maybe I should look inwards here, George, rather than lash out. And maybe we haven't done enough on Colchester. And instinctively, I thought, you know what? Yeah, I keep saying like they're my stancy team, and I think they're flying up the table. But what have we actually said in depth? And I thought, yeah, maybe there's an issue here. And I realised that they are just a classic pod blind spot team for 2 key reasons. One, they draw loads, and we don't tend to go in depth on draws. And 2, they very rarely have won on Saturdays, which means we very rarely have spoken about them positively on Monday pods. It's kind of weird, this. Like, before they'd won 3 in a row in their last 3 games, they'd drawn 16 of their first 32 games. Half of their games they had drawn. And still, even after 3 wins in a row, they've still only won 12 games this season out of 36. Only 7 teams in League Two have won fewer games than that. And then there's the fact that on the last 4 Monday pods before this one, well, last week it was slated to be a chat about Colchester, but they got gazumped because Milton Keynes sacked Scott Lindsay, so there was a Scott Lindsay chat. The Monday before, they had drawn with Wimbledon. The one before that, they had drawn with Carlisle. The one before that, they'd beaten Walsall. And it's true that the Walsall angle was probably a bit stronger than the Colchester angle, because Walsall had suddenly gone winless in 4. So sorry, I guess, to blue and white in numbers, because your team is great, and I'm not surprised you love them. And 12 goals conceded in 22 games is absolutely magnificent. And although it's fair to say that going forward, Colchester aren't quite as potent in terms of their goal return, I do think as a group of attacking players, there's still a lot to think about. You've got Jack Payne, who's still one of the best attacking midfield players, most creative players in the league. And then at the top of the pitch, you've got Lyle Taylor, still super dangerous with his movement and his nous. Then you've got Tavide and Tyrese Simpson, who provide a lot of threat, particularly in transition. And Edwards as well on the left wing, who's a real speedy dribbler. There's a lot to think about, not least the lad in midfield on loan from Notts County, McDonnell, who is a ball-winning machine and is now suspended for 3 games. And I know Colchester fans are quite worried about that. So watch this space. Colchester United could be the flyer that make the League Two playoffs, as I predicted all along. Down at the bottom, George, just a horror show for the bottom 2, really. Morecambe lost away at MK Dons. Big win for MK Dons, I suppose. offered an Orsi turning around a 1-goal deficit that Angol had given Morecambe early on. Orsi, we loved him doing the old ride the horse sea celebration last season for that wonderfully upwardly mobile Crawley side in front of an adoring fan base. Seeing him do it at Stadium MK in what sounded a bit like one of those games from the COVID era, noises rattling around an empty stadium, and him doing the horsey in front of the contingent of Morecambe fans just didn't fill me with quite as much joy, I have to say. But a good win for them. Damaging for Morecambe. And how about Carlisle going to Harrogate off the back of a win against Barrow, draw against top of the league Walsall, and they lost a big one.
I got a message yesterday from friend of the pod, James Belshaw, saying, I'll save you research this game. It was a match that happened until the 94th minute. Belshaw makes a big save, and then Harrogate score from a deflected effort.
That could be I actually think the next frontier of this pod should be outsourcing analysis to players who were literally on the pitch.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a game, as he says, that wasn't full of quality. It's a really important win this for Harrogate, you have to say, who, I think it would have been a very, very nervy one for them had they lost this game and kind of let Carlisle back in. Massive frustration, I think, for Carlisle off the back of that big win last weekend away at Barrow to only take 1 point from a home game against, the league leaders, but one of the outformed teams in the league in Walsall, and then go to Harrogate and lose the game 1-0. But to lose from a deflected effort was huge. You could see the celebration afterwards with Harrogate fans behind the goal and the players. It felt like a goal that for them feels like it would have secured their League Two status next season. It's too early for that, of course, but in terms of magnitude and the percentage shift of staying up from losing that game, drawing that game, and winning it, it's definitely significant. It wasn't a Carlisle performance without promise. Sam Lavelle in particular had a good chance in the first half, but they've got to start converting these okay performances into points and specifically into goals, which is what they're struggling for at the moment.
Yeah, relegation.
Could Mark Hughes play, sticking him up top?
He wouldn't underperform his XG, I don't think, even now.
Although, if Jordan Rhodes can, you never know.
Good point. The defeat compounded, George, Morecambe's and Carlisle's by the fact that Tranmere won a football match. Quite remarkable that Tranmere won a football match, because it feels like that hasn't happened since, 4th of Jan. A big win, and at home to a Bromley side that we've been keeping an eye on as a potential, late playoff pusher.
Yeah, for sure. This has also led to Andy Crosby getting the job until the end of the season, which seems fair enough, given the magnitude of the win, and realistically probably going through a recruitment process for a new manager is better done in the summer rather than in March, when especially with the takeover that we've heard so much about in coming to. But yeah, probably went ahead in this game through Michael Cheek, and for Tranmere it would have felt like another long afternoon, but they managed to get back into the game, and the winning goal that came from Amari Patrick was impressive. He stepped out of the back. Bromley will feel frustrated about the defensive work. A really kind of weird but quite nice finish where he almost rolled it into the bottom right-hand corner from about 25 yards, which was a bit of fun. But yeah, big result for Tranmere, capitalising on the defeats for Morecambe and Carlisle.
They're 4 points clear of Morecambe. They're 6 points clear of Carlisle. There are some games in midweek in League Two, but Accrington have a game at home to Newport. Accrington are 7 points above the relegation zone, so could be 10 by midnight on Tuesday, and they need to respond to a disappointing display at Barrow. They lost 2-0. It's 2 wins in a week for Barrow, which is a hell of a response to what was a very frustrating home defeat to Carlisle in the previous Thursday. Leo Duru steered home his first ever league goal. I've very much got my eye on this young Blackburn Rovers loanee up and down the right flank for Barrow at right back, right wing back. An amazing fireman save. I always have the word fireman in my head when I say fireman, and I've just said it by mistake there. He saved from Charlie Brown with 20 minutes to go, which was Aki's only shot on target, but still needed saving. And then Pressley with a big brave header, which is exactly what I want to see from big Aaron Pressley, who hasn't scored as many big brave headers as I would want him to so far in his career. Just his third headed goal in his career so far. The other two were for Accrington.
Wow.
So bad weekend for Aki with 4 teams around them winning. Still that big gap to Morecambe and Carlisle, which they could extend if they can beat Newport on Tuesday night. Newport off the back of a defeat at Chesterfield. This one 2-1 to the Spireites. 3 goals in 5 minutes at the end of the first half. Baker put Newport ahead, lashing home following a set piece. And that just woke Chesterfield up a little bit. Banks did the same from a set piece. And then Bim Pebble scored for Chesterfield to win the game. He then hit the post twice after that and looked really quite lively, Pebble, which is nice because he's a player that I've always been quite interested in, given that Luton signed him direct from the Canadian Premier League, which I thought was an interesting piece of recruitment. Started up front for Chesterfield, won them the game here, and looked very dangerous. 5 midweek games, as I mentioned. We'll be covering those on Under the Lights. That's our midweek recap podcast for paid subscribers of NTT20.com. These are significant fixtures at this stage of the season. So if you want to hear Monday-style recapping of them, please do sign up to NTT20.com, and we'll make sure that you don't regret it by providing you loads of great content. Sounds like a fair trade. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back with Under the Lights in midweek with a betting show on Thursday and beyond. Cheers. Go well.